On a cold night in southern Arizona, a motion sensor camera strapped to a mesquite tree blinked once. What it recorded would have been impossible a few decades earlier. A jaguar, a wild predator padding through a desert canyon less than an hour from Tucson. Over the past 30 years, 8 of these cats have been documented inside the United States. Nearly every one caught on a hidden camera or by a person who looked up at the right moment. America was certain it had wiped the jaguar off its map for good. At least, that is what everyone believed. This story doesn't start with a camera trap. It starts with a bounty. 100 years ago, the jaguar was an American animal, not a rare visitor from across the border, not an accident, but a resident. Its range covered southern Arizona and New Mexico, reached into Texas, and on rare occasions stretched as far north as the rim of the Grand Canyon and as far west as Southern California. Faded government reports and early settler photographs describe females with cubs near Flagstaff, a young jaguar near Grand Canyon Village, animals poisoned in hills that are now suburbs. The cat most people picture only in the Amazon once hunted the high country of the American Southwest. The word jaguar comes from an indigenous term meaning, roughly, he who kills with one leap. For the Maya, the cat was a symbol of power, a creature believed to move between the world of the living and the dead. For the Tohono O'odham and other peoples of this land, the jaguar was never exotic. It was simply part of the place. Every jaguar wears a coat of rosettes as unique as a human fingerprint, which is exactly how researchers tell one returning cat from another today. The jaguar's claim to this continent runs deeper than most people realize. Its ancestors crossed the ancient land bridge between Asia and North America during the Pleistocene, and some researchers argue the species first took shape in the mountains of what is now the American West before spreading south. By the time Europeans arrived, jaguars were woven into the landscape. Across the 20th century alone, more than 60 separate jaguar sightings were recorded in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, right up until the killing finally caught up with them. Then, America decided it didn't want them. In the early 20th century, government-funded predator control swept across the West. The same campaigns that gutted the wolf and the grizzly turned on the jaguar. Ranchers and federal trappers shot them, poisoned them, and ran them down with hounds. It was systematic, it was paid for with public money, and it worked. By the middle of the century, the jaguar was functionally gone from the country. The dates are brutal in how precise they are. The last confirmed female jaguar in Arizona was killed in 1963, shot in the Apache National Forest more than 150 miles north of the Mexican border. The last jaguar killed in central Arizona went down in 1964, taken by a government hunter. Arizona finally outlawed jaguar hunting in 1969. But by then, the math was already lost. There were no females left to protect. In New Mexico, the last known female was killed in 1986. Read that again. The legal protections arrived only after the animals they were written to save were already gone. What protection there was came and went like a bad signal. The federal government first listed the jaguar as endangered in 1972, then quietly dropped it from the list in 1980, and only restored full protection in 1997 after conservationists forced the issue. For 25 years, the largest cat on the continent drifted in and out of legal existence on paper, while on the ground there were almost none left to argue over. Losing the breeding females was the clearest possible warning sign that the species was finished here. The agencies in charge treated it as a closed case. For half a century, the official stance was simple. The jaguar was a Mexican cat now. Anything that wandered north was a stray male with no future, not worth building a recovery program around. If that sounds like a quiet tragedy, keep watching. The strange part is what the empty canyons did next. Then came 1996. A rancher named Warner Glenn was hunting mountain lions in the Pelanchillo Mountains, right along the Arizona and New Mexico line, when his dogs cornered something on a rocky ledge. It wasn't a lion. Glenn found himself looking at a living wild jaguar, and he made a decision that changed the entire conversation. Instead of reaching for his rifle, he reached for his camera. The photographs he took were the first images ever captured of a live jaguar in the United States. In a single roll of film, here was proof that the cat America had written off was still setting paws on American soil. That same year, on the other side of southern Arizona, cameras in the Baboquivari Mountains picked up a different male. Researchers gave him a name, Macho B. For more than a decade, Macho B was a legend. He was photographed over and over across the Borderlands, the most thoroughly documented wild jaguar the country had ever known, and he lived longer than any wild jaguar on record. He became the living proof, the face of the argument that jaguars could hold on inside the United States. For years, everything about his story pointed up. That did not last. And this is the part where things stopped being funny. In February of 2009, Macho B was caught in a leg snare, fitted with a radio collar, and released. Within days, he was in trouble. The team recaptured him, and veterinarians at the Phoenix Zoo found that his kidneys were failing. Macho B was euthanized on the 2nd of March. The investigation that followed showed the capture had not been the lucky accident it was first described as. A field biologist later pleaded guilty to a federal charge for his role in the trapping and was sentenced to probation and barred from working with big cats. The most famous jaguar in American history died at the hands of the very people studying him. If you're wondering how that happens to an animal under federal protection, so is just about everyone who has read the case file. But the cameras kept rolling, and the cats kept coming. Between 2011 and 2015, a young male settled into the Santa Rita Mountains, barely 25 miles from downtown Tucson. Conservation groups held a contest to name him, and a local schoolchild won it with El Jefe, Spanish for the boss. For roughly 4 years, El Jefe lived in oak-studded canyons within sight of a major American city, captured on camera drinking from streams and raking his claws down tree trunks before he slipped back south and out of frame. Then, in late 2016, another male turned up in the Huachuca Mountains. They named him Sombra, Shadow. The name fit perfectly. These animals moved like rumors, crossing dozens of miles of rugged Sky Island terrain, surfacing on one camera and then vanishing for months at a time. And there was a reason the sightings were clustering near the border. Just to the south, in the Mexican state of Sonora, a breeding population of jaguars has held on, the closest source of cats to the United States. In 2024, Mexico carried out the largest mammal census in its history, nearly 50 researchers running more than 900 cameras across 15 states to count its jaguars. That southern stronghold is the engine behind the American return. Every cat that walks into Arizona is a young male pushing out from that population, searching for unclaimed territory, following the mountain corridors north until a camera finally catches him. Here is what separates the last 15 years from a century of scattered sightings. It stopped being random. A research team at the University of Arizona built a network of camera traps across the borderlands and began treating the jaguar not as a ghost story, but as data. They have assembled more than 80 verified jaguar records stretching back 160 years, pulling together museum specimens, old newspaper clippings, hunting trophies, and modern footage into one continuous picture. And that picture is unmistakable. Of the 8 individual jaguars documented in the United States in the past 3 decades, 5 of them have appeared in just the last 15 years. One lost cat wandering in circles could not produce a pattern like that. This is a slow, steady drumbeat of animals testing the exact ground their ancestors were exterminated from. In the winter spanning 2023 into 2024, cameras caught a jaguar no one had ever recorded before. the 8th documented in the country in 30 years. The Tohono O'odham Nation gave the cat a name in their own language, a quiet reminder that for the people who have lived on this land the longest, the jaguar was never a foreign animal in the first place. And the cameras revealed something the early sightings never could. These weren't aimless wanderings. Over 15 years, the footage traced the same handful of mountain ranges, the same hidden water sources, the same narrow corridors of public land linking the United States to the Mexican populations below. The jaguars were following a map, an ancient set of pathways through the Sky Islands that no fence or highway had fully erased. That is the quiet revelation buried in all those night vision frames. The route home was still there. The cats had simply been waiting for the pressure that wiped them out to ease just enough for one of them to risk the crossing. So the cats are coming back on their own. The obvious question is whether the land can still hold them. According to the science, the answer is yes, and not by a narrow margin. Researchers have mapped more than 20 million acres of suitable jaguar habitat in the American Southwest, an area roughly the size of the entire state of South Carolina. Most of it is public land, managed by the Forest Service. By the most cited estimate, that habitat could eventually support a population of 90 to 150 jaguars. Not a handful of wandering males, but a genuine breeding, self-sustaining population of the largest cat in the Americas, living inside the United States. To put that in perspective, there are roughly 173,000 jaguars left on Earth, spread across 19 countries, the vast majority of them in Brazil and the Amazon basin. The American Southwest sits at the far northern edge of that entire range. These borderland cats are the frontier of the species, the leading edge of an animal trying to expand back into territory it lost. If a wild predator quietly walking back into the country that erased it is the kind of story you want more of, take 1 second and subscribe. This channel goes deep on the animals clawing their way back into the American wild every single week. Now, back to the canyons. What happened when conservationists tried to speed this recovery up is where the story really turns. So the habitat exists, and the cats are already arriving. But what one group of scientists proposed next made the slow, natural trickle look almost timid. In December of 2022, the Center for Biological Diversity filed a 107-page scientific petition with the federal government. The request was direct. Stop waiting for jaguars to wander north and hope they survive. Actively reintroduce them, releasing cats into the Gila National Forest in New Mexico, the single largest block of prime habitat left in the country. And the advocates were not guessing about whether it could work. They had a working model to point to. Because while the United States was still debating whether jaguars belonged here at all, Argentina was busy proving what reintroduction can actually do. In the Ibarra wetlands, jaguars had been gone for around 70 years. An organization called Rewilding Argentina began breeding cats and releasing them into the marshes. In just a few years, they went from 0 jaguars to a breeding population of more than 35. Today, those cats roam the wetlands freely, sightings keep multiplying, and an entire ecosystem that had lost its top predator is rebuilding itself around the animal's return. The group's conservation director even traveled to Tucson to present the work in person. Conservationists in the Southwest looked at those results and asked the obvious question. If a country in South America can bring the jaguar back from absolute zero, why can't the United States, with 20 million acres of empty habitat sitting open and waiting? And then the federal government gave its answer. In January of 2024, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service rejected the petition. The reasoning was technical, and to the people who filed it, maddening. The agency argued that jaguars reproduce slowly, raise few cubs, and breed only intermittently, which in its judgment made it unlikely that a reintroduced population could establish itself and survive without heavy, constant human intervention. New Mexico's own game department went a step further, stating there was little to no evidence that jaguars ever held a breeding population in the state to begin with. And if a bureaucratic rejection were the only obstacle in the way, the comeback might still be on schedule. But something else was being built along the border at the very same time. The findings that surfaced on that front were blunt. Researchers had warned that a 30-foot border wall cut straight through the heart of the valleys these cats use to move between Mexico and the United States could finish what bullets and poison started a century ago. One formal analysis predicted that the wall and the enforcement activity around it could contribute to the outright extinction of the jaguar, the ocelot, and other species on the American side of the line. No, that is not activist exaggeration. It came out of a study of the project's own impact. A jaguar can swim, climb, and travel dozens of miles in a single night. It cannot get through 30 feet of steel set in concrete. The clock was already ticking on these animals. The country just couldn't hear it yet. It is worth slowing down to ask why this matters beyond the cats themselves. A jaguar is more than a striking animal on a camera trap. It is an apex predator, and apex predators are what hold entire ecosystems together. In regions where jaguars hunt, studies have found they account for the majority of prey deaths, which keeps populations of deer, javelina, and smaller animals in balance. Pull the top predator out, and the whole system tilts. Prey overgrazes, vegetation thins, and the damage ripples outward in ways that can take decades to fully measure. When America erased the jaguar, it didn't simply lose a beautiful cat. It removed a load-bearing piece of the southwestern landscape, and it has been quietly living with the consequences ever since. There is one more twist in the legal fight worth knowing. The government has formally designated critical habitat for jaguars along the border, a protection meant to shield the land they need. But in 2024, in response to a legal challenge, that protected area was cut down, shrunk to roughly 1,000 square miles across 3 Arizona counties. So at the very moment more jaguars are showing up than at any point in living memory, the official safe ground for them on the map got smaller, not larger. Not everyone wants them back, and that opposition isn't all bluster. Some ranchers argue the jaguar never truly belonged this far north and shouldn't be pushed to return now, but the fear of livestock losses may be overblown. In the cattle country of Sonora, where jaguars and ranchers already share the same ground, the cats kill only a tiny fraction of the herd in a given year, often well under 2%. The conflict, in practice, tends to be smaller than the politics built around it. Most people never hear about this next part. The cameras that captured nearly every one of these returning jaguars aren't run by a big federal agency. They are tended by more than 40 volunteers, ordinary people who hike miles into the heat, the cold, and the isolation of the mountains, season after season, just to swap memory cards and batteries on the chance that one frame out of tens of thousands shows a returning ghost. The proof that America's jaguars are coming home has been gathered in large part by people doing it for free. And despite the rejected petition, despite the shrinking habitat, despite the wall, the cats keep coming. In November of 2025, that University of Arizona camera network caught the 5th jaguar in 15 years, a male photographed at a remote desert watering hole. A few months later, in early 2026, he was filmed there again, this time lingering for nearly 5 minutes at the water's edge, drinking, in no hurry at all, completely at ease. Researchers had started calling him Cinco. Every one of these cats so far has been a lone male. And a lone male, however determined, cannot rebuild a population by himself. Conservationists have been blunt about what that means. Sooner or later, for the jaguar to truly come home, a female has to make the same journey north or be helped to make it. Whether that happens by an act of policy or simply by a cat deciding to walk, no one yet knows. For now, the Jaguars returning to America are pioneers without a next generation, magnificent and alone, holding open a door the country still hasn't decided to walk through. As of 2026, the count stands at 8 documented Jaguars in 3 decades, 5 of them in the last 15 years, and at least 1 cat still moving through the canyons of southern Arizona on camera. No reintroduction has been approved, the wall is still going up, and the Jaguars are still coming anyway, quietly, one crossing at a time, taking back ground on their own terms, while the country argues about whether to let them. This story isn't over. Not even close. The next Jaguar may already be out there in the dark right now, walking north, waiting for a camera to blink. If you want to see the other great American predator fighting its way back from the edge, the video on screen breaks down exactly that. Watch it next.